Right now, liberal, progressive, they're dirty words in some places in some politics, but not in New York City and not for Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio. Can he leave the city and move it left at the same time? And also at the same time, you're talking union contracts and some belt tightening. We're about to find out. And then 4 years ago, it was just anti-taxes, anti-Obama, but now, is the Tea Party anti-Republican? That question coming up as Chris Christie moves front and center in the party, and he's taking on all comers, including from the Tea Party here. Tea Partiers warm to what may be the most electable Republican in the nation. That an open question. And Governor Christie not shying away from taking on some of those folks publicly. We're going to be talking about that with 3 years of very public feuding still to come. And later, is it the end of pot prohibition? Amazing new poll numbers. I think it'll surprise a whole bunch of you. Getting support here for legalizing pot nationwide, and this is changing at lightning speed. Will the ban on weed go the way of the booze ban in the 20s and 30s? And is our region falling behind as other places drop their bans right now? Good evening and welcome to RFL, everybody. Richard French here, and thanks a lot for joining us this Thursday evening, November 7th. Politics and policy often get lumped together, but they were really a vast difference here. And I want you to take the recent mayoral election in New York City as Exhibit A. On the politics, has been a mystery for months here. Since August, we've all known de Blasio was going to become the next mayor. Sorry, Bill. And he won on Tuesday in landslide fashion. But on de Blasio's policy, how far left will it really go, and whether he can really implement it, that is still an open question tonight. More now here from our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman.
Well, Rich, as you and everybody on the panel knows, elections are all about different leaders seeking to lead in different directions. But you have to go back 20 years in New York City, or maybe longer, to find a contrast in ideologies as stark as the transition now underway between current Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio. That contrast reflected on the faces of the two leaders as they met yesterday in a city workspace, the Bullpen, designed by Bloomberg and set to be eliminated by de Blasio. De Blasio's choices will become visible even before he's sworn in on January 1st, but his challenges and how he deals with them will be there on day one. Stop and frisk, including that federal ruling against the city recently overturned. What will de Blasio do? His plan to raise top-end taxes to fund pre-K programs, his commitments to labor, and their overdue city contracts all on the table, all providing choices for the new mayor. Whatever direction he decides, he might be entitled to try his 49-point win, providing a mandate, or at least an argument for one. But will that translate to political leverage? And we're not just talking about de Blasio here. The Times, among the many, asking just how far to the left the new mayor and the new governing team can and will take the city. The paper noting that along with de Blasio, voters endorsed two other citywide officials it describes as liberals, full-blooded liberals, public advocate-elect Letitia James and comptroller-elect Scott Stringer. Rich?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Let's bring in a panel on this. Bill O'Reilly, Republican consultant, Executive Vice President, NLO Strategies, who's worked this season for incumbent and re-elected Rob Astorino in Westchester. Bill, also a columnist at Newsday. And next to Bill, of course, is our own Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. To my right, only in this case, Evan Stavisky, Democratic strategist and partner at the Parkside Group. They were the force behind the group Jobs for New York. This cycle, largest independent expenditure campaign in the history of New York. And as always, Andrew Whitman, who you just saw, he joins us as well. Okay, the optics. I know it was just a picture here, but that uncomfortable coupling of the mayor and the person who will succeed him with de Blasio and Mr. Bloomberg there yesterday. And also some of just the atmospheric, saying he doesn't know if he's moving in because the kid still wants to go in Brooklyn. And yes, his wife will be part of the vetting team to choose all the members. As the mayor and even before him, Ray Kelly, leave this administration, it wasn't just words. He really seems, Evan, the new mayor-elect here, that he's going to follow through on this progressive policy, and he calls it his mission here. The question is, forget about what he wants. How much do you think he can actually get through?
Well, the mayor of New York City is an extraordinarily powerful mayoralty, just the way the city is structured. From deciding what the revenue each year that's going to be collected and thus setting the tone for city budget negotiations, controlling development through the Economic Development Corporation, the City Planning Commission, running and administering agencies large and small, from the police force that I think is larger than, I want to say, the Army of Finland, but larger than the Army of many actual countries, with its own sea and air forces, all the way down to running the parks. So the mayor's got an extraordinary impact on the lives of 8 million people in the city itself, and on another 8 million or so in the broader region. However, it's not an imperial mayoralty. The city of New York is still a creation of the state of New York. It can do certain things through its own charter and its own local laws, but it can't raise certain taxes without going to Albany, and it can't enact certain broader laws without going to Albany. But where the city has power to act in areas that Bill de Blasio has articulated a vision, I think you're going to see a mayor with a broad mandate with the political chops necessary to try to effectuate that agenda he laid out.
Fair or not, I think, Dominic, you'll agree. When you hear liberal Democrat, talking about closing the gap, seems that this is right for somebody to try and roll in when it comes to negotiation time with contracts. And they're saying, hey, you want to look out for the little guy? How about us in the NYPD? How about us at the FDNY? Go down the unions here. And they're all coming to a head. So he's going to be tested, I think, quickly. That's going to probably be, you'd think, his first test, if not one of the biggest, right?
It's certainly up there, those union contracts. Evan is right in terms of the mayor does have a lot of power, but the number two to that is oftentimes you have to go to Albany. And the point that I make, for all of Mike Bloomberg's billions and for all of his power, when he wanted that stadium for the Jets on the west side, Shelley Silver said, no way, no go. And we saw how that played out. That's what this new mayor is up against. He comes in with a mandate. I don't know really how long that's going to last. I frankly, Richard, don't know how long his honeymoon is going to last. He's got to deal with a budget situation, a budget gap, and that's when the reality, they always say the devil's in the details. He can want to move far left all he wants to. He's got to close a budget gap, and he's got to run a city.
Bill, what's the dirty little secret when it comes to, I mean, one of the things he talked about was once universal pre-K. Right. Well, sounds good. You got to pay for it, right? How much does his relationship with the financial sector in New York really matter when it relates to this mayor?
I don't think it matters that much because he can do virtually anything he wants, save what he needs Albany for, the tax increases, et cetera, which are significant. Right. But he's got a city council that's already way left. He could do whatever he wants. He could move as far left as he wants. I mean, there's already legislation in the council which will pass and he will sign that will allow non-citizens to vote in New York City. That's a pretty radical, thing. That's probably going to happen. He can do a lot of those things. He doesn't need the financial community so much. He has a campaign finance system that's going to reelect him.
And he's not worried about scaring them that they're going to move up to Greenwich or Stanford in droves, right?
Some of them are. I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends how much they do get afraid. We'll see that over the next couple of years. But I do predict that the name progressive will be rendered a pejorative within 5 years of Bill de Blasio becoming mayor.
Because?
Because the policies are the same as the liberal policies that destroyed that word.
Or is it because of the management style? For as cold and as dispassionate or overreaching, sometimes people complained about Bloomberg. He was methodical and efficient, at least for what he wanted, and nobody doubted he could do the math. Is there a concern, or for the right here at least a hope, that this guy's not ready for prime time?
Well, he's a leftist. His agenda is going to be driven by the Working Families Party, which is already driving a lot of the agenda in the state. But the Working Families Party created Bill de Blasio. They pushed him over the edge. The Working Families Party is essentially a socialist party. I mean, they are going to drive that agenda left and left and left.
I hear the chuckling.
I mean, the founder of the Working Families Party was the founder of Acorn. They have the same headquarters. Okay. She calls herself a socialist.
But the founder is Dan Cantor. You're referring
to about Bertha Lewis.
Right, but it's Dan Cantor that runs the party.
She calls herself a socialist. I mean, they're all out of the same headquarters at 240 Nevin Street.
Go ahead.
And I'm trying to figure out what year it is that we're actually talking about these things. The reality is the Working Families Party certainly supported Bill de Blasio when he ran for public advocate. They actually didn't endorse him when he ran for mayor in the Democratic primary. They had important members of their coalition who were in a lot of different places. They actually encouraged people to vote on their line. When asked which line did you vote for yourself on, Bill de Blasio said the Democratic line. Bill de Blasio
said they had to think about it.
But he voted for himself on the Democratic line. He certainly has had the support of the Working Families Party. He's worked closely with them. He's articulated a progressive vision while he was in the city council, while he was public advocate, and will continue to do so as mayor. However, trying to demonize through who your friends are aside, the reality is, look, Andrew Cuomo famously said, "I'm a progressive who's broke." And Bill de Blasio knows government very well. He propelled from a political operative to a household name in political circles from working for Hillary Clinton and the Clinton family obviously understands how to be moderate Democrats.
But when
and
you
how
think
to
of Bill de
compete.
Blasio, do you think he's a Clinton Democrat?
I think he had Hillary Clinton campaigning for him. I think he worked for Hillary Clinton, and I think he obviously is a very smart person who knows
When things
what,
are going good.
I think
then
they honeymooned in London.
but I think very clear what he's got to be able to do is meet the single biggest challenge that the city faces, which is all of its labor contracts are up at the same time for the first time in its history. And the reality is, if you want to talk about politics, Bill de Blasio had strong labor support in the general election, but in the primary, not so much, and not a single municipal union with the exception of a small CWA local.
Well, you can argue with him that you can look at it one of two ways. One is he came out of nowhere in the campaign here, so he really didn't have the support of the groups, but he also doesn't owe anybody anything. Which is more valuable here? It's not like he's got these long-term relationships with a lot of these unions here where they're going to cut him some slack.
He has long-term relationships. He has long-term relationships with everybody in
the
labor,
Working Families Party.
and has had a very strong relationship with everybody in labor and everybody in progressive politics, and everybody in Democratic politics. But the reality is, he's got to govern. He's got to actually deal with the single biggest existential threat to the city budget, which is negotiating labor contracts. And no matter how progressive you are, when you're the mayor, you're still the boss.
Can he deliver? What happens with stop and frisk?
Well, he's already said, to my knowledge, that he's not going to continue the appeal that Mayor Bloomberg planned on going forward with. So that means that he's dropping everything. He's delivering to his base. Hey, no matter what the courts say, I'm dropping this as mayor.
Well, with the overturn, I'm not sure exactly what he may have to continue pursuing it just to try to reverse the latest ruling that threw out Scheinland's ruling. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going to. We're probably not doing
it. It is a little murky.
Yeah,
it is a little murky.
But he's also going. I'm sorry, Bill.
I'm sorry. I was going to say the biggest threat to the city are not the labor contracts because those will remain in place under the Triborough Amendment. Whether they get renewed or not, those terms will remain in place. The biggest threat to the city is the pension costs. And that's what Bloomberg's been trying to talk about. And that's where Bill de Blasio is dangerous to the city.
And Bloomberg didn't do any great favors on the way out the door with what he left here because the contracts do come up at the same time. There is no rainy day fund, right? So it's not like he's got a lot of wiggle room to play with this. Can he, for example, just take, I know we're going to hit a break, universal pre-K. Will he, just do the math, will he be able to find the money to pay for all this or no?
In fairness to Mayor Bloomberg, as far as a rainy day fund goes, it's been raining for the last couple of years. He did take office, months after 9/11, which collapsed the city's economy. We've had a financial crisis of huge proportions since then.
And I think he started the rainy day fund, even though Giuliani did a little bit. But Bloomberg, for the most part, carried that out.
But it's been raining the last couple of years.
Yes,
so I think just
no
in
doubt
deference
about
and
it.
fairness to Mayor Bloomberg. That being said, look, Bill de Blasio speaks very articulately, very elegantly, and very passionately about universal pre-K. He has a funding system to pay for it. That requires approval from Albany. Everyone has basically said they'll have the conversation in January.
It includes raising taxes. And
Look,
it's the same time when the governor's about to say he wants to cut them.
Albany's a place where right now good ideas go to die. So the question is whether or not he's got the ability to do it in some more creative way that doesn't necessarily, get held hostage by the Senate.
A progressive is broken, a good place for ideas to die. All right, Evan, 2 for 2. All right. Now the question is, and we were asking for yesterday, what kind of mayor do you think Bill de Blasio will be, and can he get his agenda through? Head over to Facebook and Twitter, and you tell us what you have to say. When we come back on RFL, the tug of war within the GOP. Now, remember the protests we saw on Tax Day in 2009? Who would have thought that the Tea Party would have had this much impact on our national politics in the last almost 4 years? Well, Republicans now maybe rethinking that arrangement. We're going to talk more about that, and obviously, arguably the most important man in Republican politics potentially, that could be Chris Christie and how he plays in this conversation. Stay with us.